welcome to episode number 10. That's right, number 10 already of Sustaining the Herd podcast, brought to you by Sechi Agri-Services and Engineering in Raymond, Nebraska. I'm your host, Brock Vitek, joined by my co-host, Andrew Wadle, and we are excited to be back with you for this 10th episode today with a special guest as we continue, as always, to discuss innovation and sustainability in the agriculture industry, with a particular focus on animal agriculture. Andrew, I'll turn it over to you to introduce our guest.
So we talk about sustainability in lots of different ways here in Sustaining the Herd. And, what is sustainability? Part of it is really doing more with less, or really making the most of all of our resources, whether it's land, water, fuel, animals in this particular case. And we are extremely grateful and honored even to be to have with us today Karl Burgi. And we're going to have Karl introduce himself. But first, I just want to read a quote by Karl, and this really kind of sets the stage of where Karl comes from and how it relates to sustainability. And it goes like this. As caretakers of dairy cattle, we have a responsibility to do everything in our power to improve hoof health, maintain productivity, and keep cows in the herd as long as possible. I develop innovative practices to improve hoof health through an in-depth understanding of lameness's cause and effects. My personal passion and business mission is to save cows. And so, yes, our guest today is Karl Burgi, who is indeed an expert on all matters involving hoof health, lameness, etc. And extremely grateful to have Karl with us. And Karl, please tell us a little bit more about you.
Well, Andrew, thank you for the nice introduction. And just a little bit about myself. I was born and raised on a small dairy farm in Switzerland. And I came to the United States to see the world. And worked as a herds manager for roughly 10 years. And I just found there was a great need for hoof care in the region of Wisconsin where I moved into. And so I started a hoof trimming business in 1990, local providing a service contract business to farmers in the state of Wisconsin. And at that time, knowledge, I had a little bit of knowledge from my ag education in Switzerland, but it was really, you learn by doing. And I had some experience working on the farm where I did my hoof trimming, but, I started in, and after 3-4 years, I just felt like there was more to know. There was more to find out. And at that time in 1995, I attended a hoof trimming course. At those times, the Dutch were way ahead of us with hoof trimming. They had done a lot of some research, and they had developed a system. And so I wanted to learn that. And I remember coming back and having a much better understanding of the anatomy, the function of the claws, the hoof trimming. And I started implementing that, and within like 3 months, I could see the difference. Okay, and it's kind of like what everybody does when they are not sure, or the less they know about the anatomy and the function, the more over trimming they do. Okay, so with that, eventually we started at the hoof trimming school, and we had well over 5,000 people worldwide that trained through the Dairyland Hoof Care Institute school, farm staff, farm workers, trimmers, veterinarians, from roughly, I would say, over 40 countries. And then you add on the people that we go out on site and that I travel now to teach staff on farm. So with that, there's always a reason why something is the way it is. And over the last, I'd say 10, 15 years, so since about 2010, together with the University of Wisconsin, together with some of the other universities, there was some research done on lameness. And we understood that as an example, standing time had a huge effect on lameness causes. That's work Nigel Cook did in 2004 on one of my farms. And so after you understand more of that, then you actually look at, what you guys are working with, facility, cow comfort, ventilation. And what I can tell you is that probably in the last 5-6 years, that innovation that has been made to get cows to lay down better, like with, good beds, with the right cooling and some of that, the progress we've made in hoof health, in lameness, has been just phenomenal. So, like, maybe I know everything, but I still don't. I still learn every day. There's always a reason if something goes wrong, why it goes wrong. And so putting those things together, it's kind of like Andrew has some gray hair. I have a lot of gray hair. Okay. Some of these come from age, but some of those I think come from things that we learn and or we did wrong, and we learn how to do it better. Yeah. And I think my whole life has been that way. Even designing the equipment, what I found is you can peel a potato with a knife. You can use a peeler. You can use a butcher knife. Anything, you can get it done. But having the right tools, you do the work, and that's what I focused on. If there was an issue out there, let's figure out how can we improve it with the equipment, with the tools, and make things better for the farms out there.
Yeah, so I there's a couple things that you said there kind of ring true to me. The one is you can have a great hoof trimming program, but other things can be wrong, and it could make the hoof trimming look bad. And so as engineers, we always think of it, it's a system. You have to have the proper nutrition, the proper feeding, the proper stall surface, and the proper hoof trimming in order to have the animal in the best environment. And so, you mentioned, you kind of used the word claw for hoof, because I think it's something that I think they're truly called claws, right? But we kind of call them hooves anyway. But could you just give us the layman's version of, what's going on down there, with at the hoof and why it's so important to sustainability and keeping animals healthy?
Great. So yeah. So basically, a hoof is our both claws together, okay? And we have two individual claws, okay, that work independently in a way, okay? And what's happening down there is that, as an example, depending on the facility, when we look at cattle on pasture, sometimes there is normal natural wear if they have large pastures and large environments, like when we look at beef cattle or even grazing cows, okay, that walk certain amount of distance. There is, what we have to understand is the horn grows at about 3/16 of an inch a month, okay? If they walk on a really soft surface, or let's say they're on rubber, they won't be anywhere at all. If we put rubber in a whole facility, we're gonna have 3/16 of an inch every month that we have to trim off 3 or 4 times a year. On the contrary, if we have aggressive sand in a freestall barn, and we have a larger pen, like let's say we have a 250 to 400 pen size where the cows have to walk a fair amount of distance, plus a distance to the parlor, we might not have enough sole thickness for that month. So eventually we end up with a thin sole, okay? So the wear and growth are completely combined in with everything that happens, okay? Ideally, a claw should have, from an anatomical standpoint, should have about 5 mils, so a good 3/16 to a quarter of an inch of sole thickness, which is on the bottom of the foot. And the sole thickness, what we learn is more and more, if we have a lameness issue, so many times it has to do with the sole thickness, especially on the larger farms. Because what's happening is when the sole becomes too thin, the tissue inside, which is the horn-producing tissue, becomes inflamed. when it becomes inflamed, it kind of overcompensates, so it grows horn faster because it's getting damaged. And the natural reaction is it wants to get rid of that damage by overproducing horn. But the horn that's being produced at that particular time when there is inflammation is of poorer quality. Okay, so it wears faster. There's more chance that something can penetrate into the soul of the horn, especially a big rock, because the horn quality is not superior. So and the other thing to understand is, as an example, when it comes to that, the horn producing tissue, which we call the corium or the quick, comes from the horse. Usually in the horses we say the quick. That in a normal animal, if it has good circulation, so activity circulates blood, laying down circulates blood. But the more those animals stand, the more we impair circulation, the higher the inflation goes. And eventually it becomes a vicious cycle. And when we look at the farms all over the US, where we have a problem like with as an example, thinner soles with sand because they're walking a distance, or lameness from the standing, all relates about 2 months past the hottest time of the year. So what we're going to see is generally what we don't see much lameness until it starts, like I would say August 1 to October 1. Those are, so in the typical Midwest. As we go further south, it already starts earlier. Or another example this year, if you remember, Andrew, we had quite a hot early March, right? Even out by you guys, right? I can go out 2 months later and I see a peak in lame cows because those high-producing cows still had the winter hair coats on, and we didn't have the cooling systems going because it was March. Maybe the fans come on, but it was not enough to cool those high-producing cows down, because those like a cow that produces 100 pounds of milk produces about 6,000 BTUs of heat per hour.
Right.
And when they're too hot, they automatically don't lay down because they only get hotter when they're laying down. So they're standing more, which results then in all the issues we see 2 months past that heat period.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is. Karl, you may have gotten into a fair amount of this already, but could you help us understand some things that affect hoof health that might not be so obvious?
Well, I mean, again, that when you look at more data, I can give you a good example. As an example, we have like sole ulcers, which are on the bottom of the foot. We call that the standing disease, because the longer they stand, the more down pressure there is on the bottom, starts inflaming, eventually doesn't produce healthy horn, and then eventually the ulcer the sole starts to ulcerate, which causes a sole ulcer. So that's the standing disease. And then white line lesions are on the outside of the claw, usually on the outside hind feet, and they're like from slippery floors. As an example, if the floors are really slippery and the cows slip out, it's like a pounding effect internally that eventually causes inflammation. And as the horn grows out, there's a defect in the horn, and what it turns out to be, you have a bacterial infection. So as an example, if we have a large holding pen in the summer, and I'm sure Andrew or both of you guys work on designing holding pens, the more cows we put in that holding pen that produce 6,000 BTUs per hour, the hotter it becomes. Mm-hmm. So we're heating those cows up. There's no way we can cool them down when they're body to body in the holding pen to keep them cool, especially if they're producing 6,000 BTUs per hour or more. Okay, so what's happening then is they don't want to. They're so hot by the time they get to the rotary that they don't want to load on the rotary. So basically, what we're doing is we're running the crowd gate harder, and the cows start to shuffle in the back. Heads go up in the pen, and then eventually we see an uptick in white line lesions because of the cows are slipping there, right? The other thing is when they come back to the barn, the overheated cows, more than likely, they're not going to go and eat right away because they're too hot. So they go and perch in the stalls. When they're perching, all the weight comes down on the back part of the foot, again, causing stress to the outside wall, which results in white line lesions again. So those are the two lesions that are most common in today's modern farms. Sole ulcers are the easiest ones to prevent with hoof trimming. White line lesions are much more difficult because they're out of the control. If we have slippery floors, or if we run a crowd gate too hard, or if the cows are perching too much because of the hot weather, there's very little we can do from a preventative end of it.
Right. And so, Karl, just so we all understand, the white line is that you have the wall, which I'm going to call the vertical part of the hoof, and the sole, what I'm going to call the horizontal part of the hoof. And that white line, that's where the two kind of come together, correct?
Yes, exactly. So the white line is basically what connects the hard hoof wall or the supporting edge to the sole.
Right.
And it's like a half a horseshoe on every claw. It comes up the center about 1/3 of the way back and goes all the way around the outside, like to the back, nearly to the back of the heel. Okay.
Right.
So the white line lesion, generally when we get those type of things, it's just damage in the white line. What people see when they pick up that foot, sometimes it's packed full with rocks or dirt. But it would never pack full with rock or dirt if it wouldn't be damaged to begin with. So the damage comes from the inflammation inside, from the traumatizing of the corium, which then as it grows out creates that defect in the wall. So that's something that that we 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I just said, yeah, this guy's full of baloney. But today, just with all the understanding, when we look at data, we have so much more knowledge, and we can see what's happening on the great farms with low lameness, right? When we have good flooring, when we have good cow comfort and good cow cooling, it's very realistic to have lameness rates below 5%. When the national average or the average around the world is over 20%, between 20 and 25%.
So, Karl, on dairies, what do you recommend as what would be considered a normal hoof trimming schedule?
So it depends on the farm, right? And I would say the other thing, it depends on the lactation that animal is in. Okay. Generally, what we say is we need 2 checkups per year. So when we call a hoof trimming, it's basically a checkup to make sure, do I have to take anything off, or do I have to just make small modifications? Okay. Like if I have all rubber as an example, I'm going to be trimming those cows probably every 3 months. Because every 3 months you've got over a 1/2 inch of growth. And what that does is that growth is all in the front. And what it does is it actually changes, it puts the weight back on the heel. And if we don't correct that, then the lameness starts in. So the goal of hoof trimming is, cows are toe animals. Okay. They want to be on toes. And you guys probably have been raised on a farm, maybe with beef cattle, right? When you look at those little young beef calves, right, they're up at their toes like they're ballerinas, right? They're walking around, or even the bulls. It's like beef ballerinas, or you go to the state fair or the county fair, right? That's the normal claw shape, right? I would say that's probably on the beef end of it. Maybe it's a little bit more extreme than on the dairy end of it. And so the goal of hoof trimming is to get that weight up in the toe, because that's where the claw functions the best. That's where the load can be carried better than if it's back on the heel. Okay? It's like for us having a pair of shoes that are 10 sizes too long or 5 sizes too long. It's not comfortable walking. The same thing for the animals. So depending on the farm, even, more and more farms today are using manure solids, right? And so manure solids becomes, maybe you don't have as good a traction, maybe it becomes a little bit slippery, even though we fix the floors with certain types of grooving. It's not as abrasive as when you use sand. So what you have to think about is anytime a cow slips, and if it happens time after time after time, what it actually does is actually stimulates horn production, because the slipping, eventually the hit causes inflammation to a degree. If the cow doesn't lay down 12 hours a day, then that inflammation is not removed. And we know that today, that if we can get 12 hours of laying down time for every cow per day, we have much less lesions than if they're only at 11 or 10 or even less than that when it comes to the hot times of the year. So that varies on how much trimming we do. Generally, what we say is we want every cow to enter the close-up and the calving period with perfect claws. So like starting a Formula One race, right? We want to have the best tires on for that race to win. And I think that's still an important part. What we find is on most farms that ideally about mid-lactation, so about 120 days. So if we trim them as they go dry, and that's 60 days, we go 120 days onto that. That's 180 days. So that's like 6 months, And on a bigger farm today, we know that's sufficient for first, second, and even third lactation. What happens then is, if an animal becomes lame, generally what happens there is we get some internal damage, okay? And what the damage internally is, like modification to the bones, modification to the horn-producing tissue. And what it does is the integrity of the horn will not be the same anymore after that, or the whole claw will not be the same after that. So it can grow, generally it grows faster, or it has more sole growth if she had sole damage. So if she had a sole ulcer on the horizontal part, that generally grows faster if she had damage before. So a cow that had a sole ulcer and we didn't treat it right away, there is enough damage that it's always growing faster. So that's why the prevention is so important there. Maybe if the claws get long and they lay down well, you don't necessarily get a white line lesion unless those other factors that we talked earlier come into place. You overusing the crowd gate, rough cow handling, slippery floors, it all kind of brings things together and cause more issues on that way. But 2 times a year, but like on the larger farms, a lot of times we see with first lactation, if there isn't a lameness issue and if there's good cow comfort, sometimes we get by with trimming them maybe, or checking them before they go into lactation, and then do it again once they go dry.
Right.
And we use data. We can a lot of times look at data if there's an issue, and you adjust the trimming schedule that way. But I would say then when it comes to older cows that have had, and that had damage, then sometimes you need, especially the back feet, might need a couple extra inspections per year. But what the industry has gone to now, right? We're raising more beef on dairy, so we have fewer heifers that come into the herd. So we need to take care of the cows better. And I think we're ready from a system end of it because we understand so much on how to take care of that today. If you would have told me 8 years ago that we'd have a third of the herd that would be before lactation and over, I'd have said, yeah, you're full of it, right? And today, I mean, I'm going to a farm on Wednesday, a third of the cows that I trim will be 5th lactation and over.
Yeah.
You
That's
know?
fantastic, and that is going back to my opening comments. That is what sustainability is all about: keeping cows in the herd longer, and of course, provided they're still
Yeah,
profitable for the owner. And
exactly, exactly. You know, I just looked, did a post yesterday on a 8 lactation cow that's doing 150 pounds, right? And she had a lameness issue 6 months ago, which I fixed, and she looks perfect today, and is bred back again for her ninth calf, you know, and doing 150 pounds a day, capped in March, right? So I think that's where it is, you know, as we want to get more sustainable, we have to do some of those individual things to take better care of cows.
Certainly.
Yeah, you know, and when we know, you know, I think the other thing brought it to is we know what the cost of raising heifers is today, and you know, I have some farm that only raise so many heifers per year because they can get $800-900 for the for the black bull calf, 2 weeks old. Why would you want to raise heifers that you don't need? You know, and I mean now there will be a market again, but again you have to have facility to raise the heifers. Those heifers also have to be managed, and there's some guys that will be doing that, but a lot of farms just look at that. Okay, how can we be sustainable with the 500, 800, 2,000 cows that we have, and make it work?
Definitely.
that's right.
Karl, you mentioned beef on dairy as well as the beef ballerinas a little bit ago, which is a great foray into the next thing I'd like to ask you about. Here on Sustaining the Herd, we know a lot of our listeners are involved in the beef cattle feeding industry. So I'd like to ask you, where does hoof health and hoof trimming fit into the beef feedlot world?
So, you know, generally in beef lots, right? Those animals stay around for, you know, 16 to 18 months, right? A maximum of 20 months, and they go to slaughter. You know, and probably the biggest issue is in beef cows would be what I would say, or beef cattle, is when they first come off a pasture into the feedlots, there's such a huge transition, right? They're being from running the pastures in Kentucky or whatever, Montana, Wyoming, right? And then all of a sudden we bring them through a couple of sale barns and to a feedlot, and what's happening there is that it's such a big change. And what we see at that particular time, we see a little bit of lameness at that particular time, and the most generally is, especially if there's a lot of concrete on those feedlots at the beginning, because they're coming from a yielding surface within 2 or 3 days to a non-yielding surface, okay? And the thing we need to understand is that the adjustment time from yielding, so from a pasture surface to a concrete surface, takes about 3 to 4 weeks. There's a suspensory apparatus inside of the claw, and what happens is that is used to completely yield when they're on pasture. When they get on concrete, there's no more give anymore on the bottom end. It's all solid. So that causes a little bit of inflammation. And what happens is in the severe cases, the inflammation becomes so severe that those animals actually walk very timid. They walk like they're on eggshells. What's happening then, if the feedlots are kind of have a lot of rough concrete, they wear their toes out and they have toe ulcers. So actually they infect in the toe region, and that's probably one of the biggest problem in the beef lot when it comes to claw horn problems is toe ulcers. Okay, rarely you'll see toe ulcers because they wouldn't happen, you know, in that shorter time period while they're on feed. And then the other thing would be is occasionally you'll get a white line, and again that could be from having long claws, or so white line lesion from long claws, or just maybe a deformed claw or something like that, you know. So there is very little trimming that has to be done. Mainly the biggest thing would be what I'd see in feedlot would be the toe ulcers. And then in the last few years, we had some farms, especially with digital dermatitis or foot rot. And digital dermatitis is an infectious problem. So it's strictly related to hygiene. So if those animals come in and we have already infected animals in a feedlot and they commingled and the hygiene is bad, then we can, those chronic animals that we have in the feedlot already will infect new ones down the line, especially if the conditions are right. Okay,
Sure.
so infectious, and then the only other place where I see more hoof trimming done, and I'm not very familiar here in the U.S., but long fed cattle, which would be Wagyu's. Like as an example, in Australia, they started doing like a 180-day on feed, which is in the middle of their feeding period. They give them all a hoof trim to stand them, to make them ballerinas again, because what they see better carcass quality, better hair coats, better, all of that. It's improving, and if they can do it efficiently, more. And the other thing I think is animal welfare and sustainability, because if they don't do anything, it could be that those beef animals at time of slaughter for the Wagyus, they could have 6 inches extra hoof on there. Okay, because there is very little wear. Feedlots have some wear, but they don't walk miles, right? There is individual pens that even if they're dry lot feedlots, the walking distance doesn't create an extreme amount of wear. So that would be with the Wagyus, because they're really on feed for probably over I think it's over 32 months generally.
Wow.
Almost double what a normal one is, 32 to 36 months. So and I remember being in Japan, Andrew, and working with some of those farms that raised the Wagyu beef, and that's where the first time I trimmed really whole herds of beef, feeder steers or feeder cattle was in Japan, and we go in there and actually we just trim all of them at that 180 to 200 days on feed.
That's excellent. So, Karl, trimming hooves is just like any other job, in that you need to have the right tools to do the job properly. And I know that you're involved in developing some of that equipment to do it right. And so, give us an idea of the tools that are involved to do it right, or the attributes of the equipment that help you do it right.
So, probably the first priority is that when we're going to work on an animal, that we have a good restraint, so we can secure it, so we don't get kicked or hurt by trying to trim the animal. So that would be my number one. So like restraining, in the beef cattle industry, we generally use layover chutes. And sometimes you really have to reach when you lay them over, to reach for those feet to tie them down so you don't get kicked in the face, right? On the dairies today, we use more upright chutes because again, probably one of the reasons is because we can restrain them better. We look at the cow like the horse, like we shoe a horse. We look at the cow as she would put the foot back down on the floor. So, it's not necessarily the tool, it's preference thing, right? At the end is, how can I get the best possible job done? Okay. And the other thing we have to think about is, as an example, the trimming, the better the restraint is, the more aggressive tools I can use, the quicker my job will be. But if the cow moves, okay, while I'm trying to use the grinder, trimming the horn down, I might cut myself. She might kick in my grinder and the grinder goes across my hand. But so there's the grinder, or we call them chipper wheel or cutting wheels, right? They're like generally aluminum or stainless wheels with knives in them that just are like shavers, almost like a plain wood, right? Very similar to that, just in a smaller scale. And then probably the most important thing after that is to have sharp hoof knives. Like when I go out to the farm, I won't go unless they have sharpening machine on site. And we give them Okay, these are the sharpening wheels that you should use for hoof knives. These are the polishing wheels you should use, and so we can actually make sharp knives. Because when it comes to lameness, treating lameness, you're kind of like a surgeon. If you have a scalpel, you can do really precise work. But if that knife doesn't cut, you're going to do more damage to the other tissue. It's just like a sharp scissors, right? A sharp scissors makes a clean cut, or the scalpel, and those are probably the most important tools that we want to have on the farm. Even on a beef farm, all they really need is on a beef farm is they need some sharp knives. They probably need some blocks to treat the lameness, because generally what we do is we elevate the diseased claw by gluing a block with various types of adhesives on the healthy claw, because generally it's one or the other. Rarely, in really severe cases, you get two bad ones, and that's pretty devastating. But in generally, most of the problems in the back will be on the back outside claws. And 90% of all the lameness is in the back feet worldwide, over 90%. It's only about 5% that's in the 5 to 7% that's in the front. So the equipment, the right tools, sharp knives that I actually can do, because I do less damage. It's easier to work. I can be more precise with a sharp knife, and then blocks and glue to treat lameness.
Excellent.
Well, Karl, we would like to say thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule to join us today. This discussion has definitely looked at innovation and sustainability from a little different perspective than we usually do. So that's been a lot of fun, thinking about how really everything related to animal and livestock production relates to sustainability at the end of the day. So thanks again for your time.
It's a great pleasure. Great pleasure. And if anybody has any questions, they probably can get a hold of me somehow.
We'll make sure your contact information is available, and so people can surely look you up.
Certainly.
So we can help them. And like I said, the fun thing is to work in an industry where, the engineers work together with us, to make sure we have the right floors, we have the right cow comfort, we have the right cow cooling, right? All of those things are for sustainability. The sustainability today than 10 years ago is totally different. And that's why your good farms are so much more efficient, because they're more sustainable. They have better production, better reproduction. All of those hang together, and they do better with that.
Definitely. Well, thanks again, Karl. And for all of you listening to Sustaining the Herd today, we thank you once again for joining the herd, and we look forward to being back with you again in a couple of weeks for episode number 11. Until next time, thanks for joining the herd.